What is up? What is up, everybody? Thank you for joining another episode of the Insomniacs Livestream. I am your host, Dr. Andrew Kim, MD. Thank you for those of you who are regular watchers and viewers, those of you who subscribe to my channel. For those of you who are new, never watched us before, brand new to my YouTube channel, please like, please subscribe. We do these live streams every Tuesday night and every Saturday night, 10:30 Central, 11:30 Eastern. Appreciate your patience. I know that we skipped this last Saturday's episode. As I said on my post on my channel, I was pretty burnt out, pretty toasty, pretty crispy. And you know what? I said, you know what? I can't not practice what I preach to every one of my patients. And I said I was going to take a mental health day to take a day off to prevent further burnout. Didn't want to bring my C game or C minus game or D game and just go through the motions. So took a day off. I appreciated, feel a little bit more rejuvenated. Just a lot of drama and nonsense and politics at work. And I'm back at it. So I appreciate your patience. Hey, what's up, D77 and other regular listeners? So today we are going to be diving into an interesting topic. We're going to be talking about complementary alternative medication options, or CAMs for short. And we're going to talk about several different, several different CAMS options or complementary alternative medicine options that I believe have, at the very least, either decent, pretty good evidence, at the very least, modest, or intriguing evidence that warrants more research for things that probably are not funded and studied enough. Probably warrant more investigation. Probably not going to get a ton of funding for it, but intriguing options that I think we should at least talk about. Now, few disclaimers from the very beginning. As you always know, for you regular listeners, like, I am not your doctor, not giving you personalized, customized, tailored medical advice. So please don't construe any of this as the following. This is for educational purposes. This is a live stream video podcast. We're here to educate, entertain. This is not meant for you to take and say, run out to the store and say that I'm going to be, grabbing these things because Dr. Kim told me to. Second comment is, I want to be very clear too. I am not pushing any specific brand or supplements. I don't own some kind of proprietary line of Dr. Kim's nutraceuticals or Dr. Kim's super purified omega-3 fatty acids. No, maybe I wish I had some of that. Maybe I wouldn't have to work then, but I'm also not here as a salesman. So I don't have an ulterior motive or agenda. I'm not attaching any affiliate links to this particular episode. This is for us to have an open-ended discussion, that balanced discussion, because you know me. I'm a pretty open-minded psychiatrist and I'm equal opportunity criticizer. So I'm going to try to present some of the evidence that makes some of these options intriguing, theoretically exciting, intriguing, but also some of the limitations and some of the holes in, some of the excitement to slow down the gravy train that is, the complementary alternative medicine or supplement industry or herbal industry, right? So I'm going to try to present you fair and balanced, and I'm very interested to see. We don't have time today. We could spend hours upon hours about different options out there. So as we're talking, I would love to hear some of the things you have tried or some of the things you've researched, some of the things that you've heard about, because I'd like to maybe touch on some of those in future episodes. So as always, I'd love to brainstorm with you guys. So keep comments coming because we don't have time to talk about everything today. So a few comments coming in. D77, good news, getting the Sublocade shot next week. Really looking for it. Hey, I didn't forget. I'm glad to hear that. I hope that it's tolerable. Hopefully not too many side effects. Hope that it's helpful and beneficial to you. I'm glad to hear that, D77. I know you've been mentioning that, so I'm glad that more than anything, whether it's the Sublocade or something else, D77, I really mean it. It's really more the fact that you are motivated, that you're in the action phase of change, right? Meaning you're even beyond, pre-contemplative, contemplate. You're doing stuff. So good for you, man. Good for you, D77. So let's dive into it. So I want everyone to keep in mind some general topics, general concepts, that is, right? That what we're talking about today A lot of these options have limited, modest, or okay evidence. At the very least, they're very intriguing to me. That's why I want to mention some of these. None of these are FDA approved for specific conditions like major depressive disorder, OCD. We're going to be talking about some of these things, but none of these are FDA approved. So I want to be crystal clear on that. Okay. So you also don't need to run off to your family medicine doc or your psychiatrist, neurologist to demand these things. You may get blank stares. You may get looks. You may get comments that stupid YouTuber Dr. Kim has no idea what he's talking about. And I'm going to say, I am not an expert in complementary alternative medicines, but I actually do recommend them to keywords select patients where I think it's appropriate to attempt a low risk intervention. Okay. So I'm not an expert, but I know enough and I research enough and I'm open minded enough. And I try to do my due diligence to recommend things that might make sense for very specific scenarios for patients who are interested. And I'm very transparent and as blunt as I've been in the last minute about the evidence and its limitations. Okay. Keep in mind that a lot of the studies that I'll be referring to or vaguely referencing often include patients and research subjects who have mild to moderate severity. That's how a lot of research studies are for the most part, unfortunately. So there's already going to be a limitation. Even forget the quality of the studies and the rigor of the studies, is that we're also having some selection bias that a lot of these studies are geared towards mild to moderate severity populations as a general statement. Okay. And finally, before we get into some specifics, I think another concept that's important to talk about is my mindset here today when we're talking about this, right? I think we need to just be flexible with our mindsets, myself included, right? And everyone who's listening, that we shouldn't have this adversarial mindset, right? Of prescriptions versus herbal remedies, prescriptions versus natural options, prescriptions versus holistic, however you want to phrase it. And those are all variations of, different subtypes of non-prescription options. Because I don't think it has to be that kind of adversarial kind of mindset. I think that's what kind of silos people's attitudes, mindsets, treatment options, because we make it this kind of weird, battle between these two things. Let's try to keep our minds open about the synergy that nature and natural options have with science, right? I'm going to give you some examples and then we'll get into some specifics that we're talking about today. Like, for example, right, pretty much everyone in the world is familiar with aspirin, right? Like, oh, this is just something from, pharma companies and, Bayer aspirin and blah, blah, blah. But, look, aspirin is derived from the bark of the white willow tree, right? You can go look it up. I could be off on my, I don't know, what do you call it, botany or not botany? I'm not into plants, um, but what I mean is, right, this is something found in nature and then it's been harnessed. You can argue that the, prescription industry or pharma industry, right, we find ways to make it maybe better bioavailable, isolate a chemical, make it a little bit more potent, et cetera, et cetera. For those of you who are familiar with the psychiatric, realm or mental health disorders, you are likely familiar with valproic acid, which is also known as Depakote. Neurologists use it as an anticonvulsant, meaning for seizures. We in the field of psychiatry use it for bipolar disorder as a mood stabilizer. So valproic acid, aka Depakote, is actually a methylated derivative of valeric acid, which is found in valerian root, which is why even to this day, people are using things like valerian root over the counter to promote GABA, GABA, a GABA kind of promotion, in the brain to try to produce somewhat of a calming effect. So people use valerian root sometimes for, off-label use for, trying to reduce anxiety, to maybe help with insomnia, to help with some irritability. Makes sense to me because we have, obviously harnessed science to then take that into a chemically modified derivative to use for bipolar disorder, to reduce mania, to reduce acute mixed episodes of bipolar disorder, to actually, try to restore a better homeostasis of glutamate and GABA in the brain to control epilepsy of all things, right? So again, connecting nature to science, right? Last couple examples. Bupropion or Wellbutrin, which some of you may be familiar with, that's an FDA approved antidepressant. It's also known to be a mildly stimulating antidepressant, right? It's not an SSRI. It also has very minimal, much lower risk of sexual side effects because it's not really directly, an SSRI. There's some indirect serotonin action, but it's also known to be a little bit mildly stimulating. So sometimes some psychiatrists will even use it in very select scenarios off label for ADHD. Mixed results, I would say marginal results to mild results, but sometimes it's used to do it because of that mild stimulating property. And its side effect profile reads as if it were a stimulant: insomnia, appetite suppression, weight loss, dry mouth, constipation, nausea, headaches, everything you hear when you read about stimulants. And interestingly, there are even some of these weird, like boutique weight loss clinics that will sometimes prescribe bupropion as kind of an augmenting agent to someone's, diet and exercise regimen to like accelerate weight loss. So it is, in fact, a mild stimulating, antidepressant. Interestingly, that bupropion is a derivative of, I might be mispronouncing, but cathionine, which is from the khat plant, Khat. We should do an episode one day on khat because that's a plant that you could chew the leaves of, and you can actually get a stimulant, wakefulness effect. People abuse it, actually even get transient psychosis from. So trust me when I say, right? I mean, there are psychoactive properties to even the pure, the plant leaf itself. And that's where we've derived some of these stimulating properties to try to harness it for antidepressant purposes with bupropion. Finally, galantamine, right? That's used to treat and slow down the progress of Alzheimer's dementia. And that's found in the bulb of a snowdrop plant, a flower. I mean, so this is what I'm saying, right? Rather than having this kind of adversarial nature versus pharma, it's look, there is a Venn diagram, right? It's like in order to make these chemicals, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, I mean, it's usually something derived from nature. It's not like we just magically create these things out of thin air, right? I mean, so that's what I'm talking about. So that's what I mean by open-minded. Can we have an open-minded, balanced discussion, not the herbal supplement, holistic, complementary industry is crap, pharma is crap. It's the truth is in the middle somewhere, in my opinion, right? That's what I mean by open-mindedness. So let's examine some examples that I want to go through one by one. And some of these I have some evergreen videos on. For those, I'm going to be a little bit briefer. So let's go through some that I feel, well, not just I, but other experts in kind of the CAMS realm of medicine also feel have decent evidence, right? Specifically, let's start first, like in the realm of depression, then we'll work our way to a couple of other areas like sleep and OCD and compulsive disorders. But let's start off with two that are pretty well known: St. John's wort and SAMe for short, SAM-E, SAMe, and St. John's wort. So St. John's wort, let's start with that one. So let's be clear. There are a couple of active ingredients in St. John's wort. So here's an interesting, tricky part, right? So the main active ingredient that is felt to have the antidepressant properties within St. John's wort is the hypericin, Hypericin, hypericin. And I want to start off with this before people rush out and go look at St. John's wort. Is sadly, studies have shown that like up to like half the products that have been tested in terms of like major marketed brands in the United States that claim to contain hypericin as an active ingredient in their St. John's wort actually don't contain a trace of it at all, which is crazy, right? Which speaks to some of the dangers and the vulturing that happens in kind of this unregulated world of these over-the-counter complementary medicines, right? They're marketed as dietary supplements, and you always see the fine print. These claims have not been, approved by the FDA. This is a dietary supplement. So because of that, they could just make bold claims, say whatever they want, literally, and they're not held to the same standard. Yet you know what they're doing, right? It's a loophole to market this as complementary medicine, not as a dietary supplement. Get real. It's such a stupid loophole. We should hold these folks to a higher standard, maybe not as high as like the pharma industry, but higher standard than what we're doing, right? It's almost ridiculous how low the bar is for this, right? And so it's it's not even about potency. It's not even about variance of one brand's milligrams to the other. I'm saying literally some of these don't even contain the damn active ingredient that they say they have. I mean, that's insane. So beware of that, okay? Because it's not just St. John's wort as a whole, because there's a few active ingredients. It's the hypericin component that seems to have the antidepressant component of St. John's wort. Now, what are the proposed mechanisms of action of St. John's wort? I don't want to get into, we could talk an hour on this, but some of the theories are they do believe, and I think this is pretty firm, this is not just vague, there is some degree of an SSRI action. So you could literally think of St. John's wort as nature's, I guess, SSRI. There is felt to be some mild norepinephrine reuptake, a touch of dopamine reuptake inhibition, that we believe that it can, modulate 5-HT2A receptors. 5-HT is basically the, compressed, I don't know, acronym or symbol for serotonin, and there's various serotonin receptor subtypes. So 5-HT is a serotonin receptor, 2A is a subtype. We believe it modulates the 5-HT2A receptor. We believe there's a little bit of an antioxidant effect, but we do believe at the very least there is some SSRI action. Maybe modest, maybe mild, but it is kind of like nature's SSRI to some degree. And interestingly, although I said and prefaced this by saying these are not FDA approved in the United States, some countries these are. Like if you look at in Germany, Germany licenses St. John's wort as something that can be used and recommended for mild keywords, mild to moderate depression. Though, if you look carefully, there are controversies about the quality of the studies, the length of the trials. They actually have done several head to head studies of St. John's wort versus SSRIs. Now, here's the criticism: in some of those head to head studies, they often used subtherapeutic doses of SSRIs, meaning they weren't even using what are agreed by the research field as bare minimum therapeutic doses. So it's hard to really derive a ton from those head-to-head trials. They did some head-to-head trials with tricyclic antidepressants, and again, sadly, some of them used subtherapeutic doses of tricyclic. So I don't really put too much stock in the head-to-head trials, but at the very least, there is some consensus that keywords for mild to moderate depression, it does seem to possibly be better than placebo, the placebo or control group. Okay, but again, we're going to have a balanced conversation here. I'm not just some guy saying, hey, just this is a cure all for all. No, like there were definitely mixed results. And I would say, in particular, mixed results and maybe not the great evidence in severe depression. And to me, that's a little concerning and a little peculiar because if you understand clinical research, specifically in the field of depression, usually we see the most robust effects and the best signals when you're comparing to a control group or a placebo group in the most severe patients. And it makes sense. I mean, just follow the logic, right? If you're starting from a more severe standpoint, you just have that much more room to work with to actually detect a clean signal, ruling out other confounding variables, right? So the fact that, it's almost the inverse, right? You're not actually showing much evidence in the severe groups. That's a little concerning, but again, to be fair to St. John's wort, I just think better quality studies, larger, better powered studies probably need to be done, but intriguing nonetheless, because they're right. If we believe, and I know you've heard my criticisms, there's huge limitations to this whole monoamine hypothesis of SSRIs. But for the portion of patients that SSRIs might help, it's intriguing to see that maybe this is, an alternative non-prescription version of something that can mimic what SSRIs do to some degree. Now, another concept we should talk about though, right? These cams, are they risk-free? Hell no, they're not risk-free. Okay, come on. And that's where I get a little upset sometimes, right? Because you go to the grocery aisle, you go to the pharmacy shelf, you pull it off, and you don't really see many warnings, do you? Right? You see cute pictures, you see soothing pictures, right, of a valley, a waterfall, butterflies. I don't know. KG's got to come up with some illustrations that we could market for a proprietary brand of St. John's wort or melatonin. But these soothing images, right? And you don't see those scary things that you hear, right? You guys have seen, right? Whether in a print ad, a social media ad, or for those of you who actually watch TV anymore, all those kind of advertisements for psychiatric meds, cholesterol meds, whatever. And then the guy who sounds like the Micro Machines guy from the 80s. For those of you who are old enough, you remember Micro Machines, and they had that dude on the ad who talked like an auctioneer, right? And at the end of the commercial, they'll say, "Please note that duloxetine or Cymbalta may cause headache, sexual dysfunction, stroke, blah 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 blah," and they list 8,000 things that are scary as hell, right? And you don't see that with the holistic, complementary or CAMS industry, right? Because they're not held up to the same standard. But so here are the things, right? Here, this makes sense though, because St. John's wort to some degree is an SSRI. Read the side effect profile. It has very similar side effects to SSRIs: nausea, diarrhea, stomach upset, insomnia, headaches, and no, St. John's wort, you don't get a free pass: sexual dysfunction. So you can't have it both ways. For those people who are like, "Oh, St. John's wort, so much safer than SSRI." No. So I want to hear, where is the PSSD network, right? Are we going to be equal opportunity? Or are we going to just pick and choose what we're going to call dangerous, right? Where are you guys? I'm being serious. I'm not being facetious, right? I mean, where is the outcry for this industry for causing sexual dysfunction? I mean, if we really wanted to, right? I mean, it's just like, if, again, in my opinion, God, if I was a malpractice firm, this could be a field day, right? Almost zero warnings about the fact that you can cause all these same side effects that SSRIs has, and even sexual dysfunction, right? And it's not just me. Look, let's go look. I mean, we have. I mean, here's the. I mean, if you guys want, I could send you that. I mean, there are studies that have been done by relatively neutral, right? Like NIH funded studies at times. And I know they're not pristine, they have their own biases as well. Every human has a bias, but non pharma industry studies that have even shown sexual dysfunction potentially from St. John's wort because it has SSRI mechanisms: delayed ejaculation, reduced sex drive, delayed orgasm, erectile dysfunction, and even potential effects on sperm motility, abnormal sperm counts, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And animal studies that show even more concerning effects on reproduction. So, and here's the thing, right? If we, and trust me, I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying, let's not have a double standard, right? We have the PSSD network quoting animal studies repetitively about SSRIs and saying that's good enough because right now we don't have human literature. And why is it not good enough for St. John's wort? Where is the outcry for St. John's wort? So I'm not turning this into a let's be against St. John's wort. I'm saying, again, it's intriguing that there is real evidence because look, we see this similar, almost identical side effect profile to SSRIs. We see similar mechanisms to SSRIs, meaning I don't doubt that for the appropriate patient, and again, where there is murkiness is what dose, the quality of the St. John's wort you're getting, because I quoted you before, Up to even 50% of these things are basically like falsely even claiming what's actually in their St. John's wort, right? But I believe that it can work for some patients. I do. I do. Okay. One other thing to point out, in addition to the kind of general serotonin based side effects, is St. John's wort can induce certain liver enzymes. When I say induce, it can make some of your liver enzymes work faster, be more hyperactive than usual, and that can affect levels of certain different drug types, even things like birth control. So if you're on certain, not all, so I don't want to scare people, but certain birth controls can have their levels reduced, which could then affect its efficacy. And you know what happens then. So, just things to be aware of. There are real side effects, there are real drug interactions, but there's real mechanisms of action that are very similar to what our prescription grade medications do. So, I do believe that it could be a useful tool. And there's enough studies in some countries even recommend it for milder cases of depression. Very interesting. I'm going to be briefer about SAMe, okay? SAMe, because they share some similarities. SAMe can also enhance the transmission of the various monoamines, meaning serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine neurotransmitters. Similarly, because they affect those legitimate neurotransmitters, just like St. John's wort, just like SSRIs, SNRIs, etc., you can get nausea, diarrhea, constipation, insomnia, dizziness, anxiety, sweating, all the same things we see with like SSRIs. Now, here's the interesting thing. SAMe also has numerous case reports and case series on inducing mania in patients who might have had known bipolar disorder, maybe even non-recognized, undiagnosed, or something misdiagnosed as something else when they had bipolar disorder, and actual hypomanic or manic episodes were induced. But that tells you something, though, right? Yes, that's a concern, that's a danger, but if something has the ability to induce mania, well, it's got to have some semblance of antidepressant property, meaning lifting your mood, right? From a lower state to a higher state or elevated state, right? So, right there, again, I'm not saying that it's going to work for everyone who has major depressive disorder, but we can induce mania with it. I know that's a very rudimentary way to think about it, but think about what I'm saying. Then who's to say for a non bipolar patient that it couldn't lift your mood to some degree? Right? In addition to the standard side effects, probably a slightly different concern that I'd want to point out, distinct from the St. John's wort with the enzyme induction in your liver, would be immunocompromised patients should be a little bit leery and probably talk to their, physicians, nurse practitioners about SAMe, because SAMe can promote the growth of certain microorganisms, like the microorganism involved in pneumocystis. So some immunocompromised patient, that would be at least something that make you pause, talk to your prescriber. Maybe this is not the one you'd want to go with. So again, just because it's over the counter doesn't equal totally safe. There are side effects, and they're going to be very quirky, specific, nuanced concerns, like the liver enzyme induction and drug-drug interactions with St. John's wort, SAMe, and some immunocompromised patients. For those of you who are curious, let me see. I put another graphic on here. Be brief on this one, but now let me adjust this here. This is something I pulled just to make sure I'm giving credit to the Carlat report. This is one of their monthly newsletters that shows some, again, anecdotal from some literature, some recommended starting doses. And again, see, so even what I was talking about, there's even some literature about some stimulant like effects with SAMe. But dosing regimens are out there for people to take a look at. We're not going to go into a ton of minutia there. St. John's wort, as you can see, you want to make sure, as I mentioned, the hypericin component That is the active component that's felt to have that kind of antidepressant effect. Okay. We'll talk about this one up here, the curcumin, in just a second. Okay. But for those of you who wanted to at least see, there are, like, again, based off limited research, some dosing regimens. Now, let's move on. This one, I already put out an evergreen video. I think it was like, when was it? Was it a week ago or something like that? So I'm going to be brief on this one. I actually think this one has, just as much, if not maybe even, slightly more evidence, at least enough studies that we've done numerous meta-analyses, is the concept of omega-3 fatty acids. And I'm going to be very brief here because if you are interested, go watch my evergreen video on this. But omega-3 fatty acids, there's been like 40, 50 randomized controlled studies of decent quality. They've done numerous meta-analyses, including one as recently as a couple years ago. I believe it was 2023. And again, is it a cure-all? No. But we continue to see that there's enough evidence to support that it may help a cohort of patients who suffer from clinical depression. There's theories that maybe it's partly due to the anti-inflammatory effects that omega-3 fatty acids can promote. It might actually change, literally, kind of the structure of the brain, the cell membranes in neurons. Literally, it could affect how they respond and its sensitivities to transmission of certain neurotransmitters. So there's numerous theories, again, loose theories. It may even promote neuroplasticity to some degree. Okay. But to be more pragmatic, there are different forms of omega-3 fatty acids. Most of the studies involved, the ones that had at least the better results and findings, were either EPA, omega-3 fatty acid, or a higher split ratio. If you have a blended type of omega-3 fatty acid supplement, at least like a 2-to-1 ratio or greater ratio of EPA to DHA. So the key is that the EPA ratio has to be higher than the DHA. Some studies will say 3-to-2, 2-to-1, but higher ratio of EPA to DHA, not the other way around. Okay. And other studies just used 100% EPA. Now, typically they recommend about doing 1,000 milligrams a day for 2 to 4 weeks to see if there's any improvement. But some newer meta-analyses actually suggest it's probably, if tolerable, of course, if tolerable, that maybe doses of 2,000 milligrams to 3,000 milligrams may have, a better statistical chance of success for, specifically for major depressive disorder. Okay. Again, is anything risk-free? No. Belching, burping, nausea for those who are sensitive. At high doses, usually 4,000 milligrams or higher, there could be concerns about prolonged bleeding. So if you're on anticoagulants or blood thinners, you have a major surgery coming up, considerations. But for the most part, it's going to be gastrointestinal issues: belching, nausea, fishy odor, fishy taste. If you smell your own burps, fishy. I guess that could be a little, off-putting to yourself, even, not alone other people. But think about that. Relatively low risk, potential upside, right? And so I wouldn't go overboard being like, hey, let's bank on this alone. But look, in this specific scenario, right, we're augmenting an SSRI, SNRI, bupropion, some antidepressant with this. Great. Patient saying, I don't want to do meds. That's not for me, but I'm doing therapy right now. Augmenting therapy with it, right? You're already getting an appropriate, probably more robustly evidence-based therapy intervention, like cognitive behavioral therapy, interpersonal psychotherapy, but you're like, screw SSRIs. I like my boners, don't want to get erectile dysfunction. Say, hey, how about omega-3s? May cost you $10 to $20 a month, may get belching, burping, maybe some nausea, queasiness, but you know what? It may actually work, and it may help and augment the therapy you're doing. What do you say? That's what I'm saying, right? Not overselling this, not pushing this down people's throat, but in these appropriate scenarios, it might make sense to test it out because of that risk-benefit ratio, right? Let's move on. I'll be brief because, again, if you want to hear more detail, got like a 8, 9, 10-minute video on this on my YouTube channel in my evergreen content. For the sake of time, let's move on. You saw it flash up on the screen, but let's talk about curcumin, which is found in turmeric, right? Now, the mechanism isn't the clearest, okay, but they do believe there may be a combination of factors, maybe an anti-inflammatory effect, similar to some of the other options we talked about. Uh, there may be actually, part of that anti-inflammatory effect is basically reducing spikes and peaks of sustained high levels of cortisol in the body. It actually may indirectly increase brain derived neurotrophic factor. And we talked about how certain antidepressant interventions like ketamine, as ketamine may promote BDNF or brain derived neurotrophic factor for increased plasticity. Interestingly, curcumin may have some element of that being an indirect end result of curcumin. Again, not how do I put? Not all turmeric or curcumin is created equally. Um, a lot of the studies that are quoted in some of these journals, at least as having intriguing preliminary evidence, use products that had 95% curcuminoids. And some people who are like experts in this field also recommend finding a type that actually contains piperine. And that's an extract of black pepper. And that apparently increases the absorption and bioavailability of curcumin itself. Because without that, apparently the bioavailability of curcumin is very low, which is part of the criticism about why, some of these studies have such variable results. Um, they wonder if part of it is just due to the low bioavailability. And had some of these studies been done with methodologies like piperine or other ways to increase bioavailability, would we have had different results? Intriguing theory and concept. But again, food for thought as another, intriguing option. So again, I'll flash it up because this was here earlier, just on the image. Not going to talk about saffron because I actually think there's even less robust evidence for that. But for curcumin, again, there are dosing regimens out there. And for those of you who really want to get into the weeds, like I said, as you can see on the right hand column, we're not talking about, um, you know, $100 a month variations of this, right? And there's so many clinics out there, and there's so many practitioners who try to push their proprietary blend of this and that. I guess there's some merit to it because you heard my criticism about some versions of St. John's wort not even containing that hypericin. So yeah, like, are there some specialty places that can find you some of these niche products? Yeah, I get it, but you can see the prices on the right hand side. If you look hard enough with the advent of the internet at this point, right? Like, and Amazon and all these things, you should be able to find something relatively affordable. And one thing I do respect when some of these research studies are being done in the CAMS realm is they're using affordable subtypes so that hopefully, if at some point there's enough buy-in that this could be generalizable, right? Not trying to find you the $150 a month versions, but the $7, $13, $20 a month versions, so that if people wanted to try these, that you can hopefully use generalizable, relatively affordable options. And I respect that. I respect it when these people are doing it that way, thinking even about, generalizability. Some of it may not even be that noble. They might be like, how do we keep our costs down when we're running the study? So it may just be an indirect effect of budgets and budgetary concerns, but whatever. The fact is that the public would benefit because they're using options that are going to be within the realm of reach, right? Last couple things. Let's talk about very quickly melatonin. Let's talk about N-acetylcysteine or NAC. Um, Melatonin, again, I have an evergreen video on this, so I'm not going to go into excruciating detail, and many people are familiar with melatonin. Okay. Now, here's the thing about melatonin. The most robust evidence, keywords, I'm not saying there's no evidence for the other subtypes, but the most robust evidence for the use of melatonin is when someone's circadian rhythm or sleep phase is kind of just out of sync or out of whack, and you're sleeping too late and waking up too late, and you're trying to shift that entire sleep cycle earlier, several hours earlier. That can happen from, working night shifts, from jet lag, from traveling through multiple time zones, or just, out of conditioning and habituation. You've just kind of gradually started sleeping later, later, and later. And due to routine and conditioning, it's just now shifted, right? And you're having a hard time shifting it back on your own, even using non medicinal interventions, right? That is the specific type of sleep issue that melatonin really has the most robust evidence of helping for. I think most researchers and even sleep specialists um, is okay, Jesus, with saffron paella is antidepressant. Okay, very good, very good. Yeah, D77. Like, give us updates if you don't mind. I don't want you to overshare, but yeah, I hope it goes well for you with the Sublocade. Um, so now, look, is there evidence that melatonin can help with kind of that early portion of the night? I just want to get to sleep faster. I want to sleep longer in the middle portion. Yes, but I would say mild to modest at best. Okay, so really, the bulk of the evidence is for kind of shifting, you know, the sleep cycle earlier, getting it that phase back in sync, right? And there is this misconception. There is a misconception that melatonin's supposed to kick in like Xanax or Ambien. It's supposed to knock you out. And look, I don't want to make a blanket statement. There are folks out there who are sensitive and maybe they do feel groggy within the first 20, 30 minutes of taking it. But I would actually say that's uncommon. And I would actually argue that for a lot of people, that's probably more of a placebo effect, meaning if you're buying melatonin, think about what I'm saying here. If you're buying melatonin, you're already probably tired and you're sleep deprived, probably already exhausted at the time that you're taking the melatonin itself, right? And now you're saying, I expect that this is going to knock me out because this is what's being promoted by whatever company that I'm buying this from. Because you see it with the cute Ollie brand at Target, right? It's like a bunch of Z's and butterflies and a cloud of dreams showing you're going to La La Land, right? So these companies promote it as if you're going to pop it and you're going to drift off to La La Land immediately, right? So don't get it twisted. You guys in the holistic cams, supplement, just don't. You guys promote it as if it's goddamn Ambien, okay? And that's not how it works, okay? And that's where people get disappointed. And unfortunately, that's where sometimes melatonin gets a bad rap because people have false expectations or unrealistic expectation of what melatonin is going to do. It's not some it's not Ambien that's going to knock you out. It's not Lunesta, okay? So really, what minus the people who are super sensitive who might actually get kind of groggy, okay, I think for most people, you're actually not going to get that. So one shouldn't I never tell patients when I recommend, I said, you might, but it's rare, but like what you're probably not going to get super sedated when you take melatonin. If you look and scour sleep study literature, sleep experts, you're going to see a consensus. The hours may be variable, but most sleep experts are going to say you need to take your melatonin 2 to 4 hours before your intended bedtime. Okay. 2 to 4 hours before that, because what we're trying to do is we're basically just trying to mimic and supplement and complement what your body already does. Like several hours before bedtime, like in the early evening or mid evening, your brain releases melatonin already. There is already a natural surge of melatonin. So it's not like this is some foreign alien, chemical. Like this is something that gets released as your body is saying, hey, it's sunset, it's dusk, it's time to wind down. And it starts a cascade of events. It's almost like a triggering mechanism to kind of tell your body, slow down, wind down, calm down, start to relax. And there's all these secondary things that happen after your melatonin surge. But that tends to happen, hours, before you actually go to bed. So most sleep specialists are going to say, hey, take this 2 to 4 hours before bedtime. Okay. Don't do things to fight against it when you're going in bed, like watching your phone excessively. doing exercise right before bedtime. So don't do stuff to counteract it. And give it about 2 consecutive weeks at least to see if you do it compliantly, consistently for 2 weeks. Does it work? Yes or no? Some will argue maybe give it 2 to 4 weeks, but several weeks at the very least. Most agree that you want to do it at least a minimum of 2 weeks. And if it's not really helping you, then obviously you can modify the doses. I do believe there's almost an overdosing of melatonin. Some people need as little as zero point 0.5 milligrams, 0.25 even, zero point 0.5. But you could start at the low end, work your way up, and that might extend your little trial or experiment. So, people take anywhere from 1 to 5 milligrams, but I wouldn't recommend anything higher than 10, honestly, because then you do start to invite a lot higher incidence of side effects. Again, is it risk free? No. You can get dizziness, you can get flushing, you can get dry mouth, you can get several different things, even some stomach upset sometimes. You can get a lot of things if you just push the envelope a little too much. I wouldn't really exceed 10 milligrams. I'd say in the beginning phases, 1 to 5 milligrams, and then you can work your way up. As a general kind of comment, everyone's different. But I do think that for some folks, if it's really more about shifting this sleep pattern earlier because it's out of phase, then very reasonable. And another example of something, I think this one of all the ones I've listed so far has the most buy-in from the medical field, family medicine, internal medicine, psychiatry. I actually think, though, most people, when they recommend it, aren't recommending it with these instructions. Some people are just take one right before you go to bed, right? And it's more of this kind of lazy kind of response to patients without kind of walking them through how to try it, for how long, warnings, not to exceed certain dosages, right? So it's important. And I actually do sit there, and when I have patients of mine saying, oh, yeah, I tried the melatonin, it doesn't work, effing sucks. Number one, was it even appropriate for your subtype of sleep problem? And I would say, well, it wasn't probably going to work. There's really not great evidence for that. So is it even appropriate for that specific sleep issue? How long did you use it? What time did you use it? What dose did you use it? All those things matter. And I would say 9 out of 10 times, those things aren't lining up. One of those things is not ideal. Okay. That's just, again, anecdote. Yeah, it's an anecdote, but I would say almost 90% of the time, one of those factors is not ringing true. And I say, well, that's probably at least a factor. I'm not blaming the person. I'm just saying, like you didn't really take it in the way that research kind of studied it. Right. So let's move on. Last one, because for the sake of time, like I said, we could go on and on. Each of these could probably be its own episode, but let's talk about something called N as in Nancy. So N-acetylcysteine or NAC. Okay. N-acetylcysteine is crucial for the production of glutathione, which is a potent antioxidant. Okay. N-acetylcysteine is used off-label for compulsive disorders like skin picking, hair pulling, and even for OCD. But where it's mostly used is actually as an antidote for acetaminophen overdoses in the emergency room. So that's where, again, let's connect non-prescription to, legitimate medical use, right? This is something that people can buy over the shelf, over the counter, as an antioxidant supplement to add to their multivitamins every day. In the ER on a regular basis, people use this in the ER as a life-saving, keywords, life-saving intervention for someone who's come to the ER, overdosed on acetaminophen or Tylenol, and if they got there in time, this could be a life-saving intervention. Because when you overdose on acetaminophen, as crazy as it sounds, something as benign as acetaminophen that you buy over the counter, overdose can lead to rapid liver damage, and with liver cells, being damaged, there's free radicals and toxins that spread and then can basically cause multi-organ damage. It is nasty when people do this. And if we get to the ER in time, they can hook you up to an IV and pump you full. of NAC through an IV, liquid NAC. Okay. Obviously, that's not what we're doing what we're doing in the field of psychiatry. We just recommend higher doses of what people take as their like daily antioxidant supplement. And they're again very decent and at the least modest evidence that it may help a portion or percentage of people with compulsive disorders and OCD. So OCD specialists, compulsive disorder specialists will say, "Hey, look, um, we can use this to complement your cognitive behavioral therapy, your exposure response prevention therapy, or your SSRI, etc., your other meds for these disorders." Again, loose theories, but we believe there could be an anti-inflammatory kind of process. Like I said, talked about kind of its antioxidant properties that it has. We do believe there is glutamate. We've talked about glutamate in past episodes, glutamate modulation. And we do believe there is sometimes some theories are that there's an excess of glutamate transmission that are happening in compulsive disorders. And this can basically regulate that excessive glutamate activity. We also believe it can restore a healthier balance of glutamate levels in the nucleus accumbens. We've talked about that. Nucleus accumbens is the region of the brain that's associated with reward, motivation, pleasure, conditioning. And we believe that maybe this can help break that cycle of this reward conditioning mechanism that happens in the nucleus accumbens. Again, loose theories, but these are some of the loose theories that have led to numerous research studies, some with positive findings, some with mixed findings, but findings nonetheless. And the way that we typically dose N-acetylcysteine, you're going to read variable things, okay? When it's typically used as an antioxidant, they're using doses like 500, 600, maybe 1,000 milligrams a day. In most of the studies for these compulsive disorders and OCD, they tend to be using 2,000 to 2,400 milligrams a day divided into two doses, all the way up to even 3,000 to 3,600 milligrams a day, anywhere from like 8 to 12 weeks typically. Okay. So where it can get a little annoying for NAC is there aren't a lot of companies and brands that make these high dose ones. So sometimes, depending on what you find, you might have to take like 4 capsules at a time. It can get pretty annoying, but it can be done. And, there are definitely widely available options that are like 1,000, 1,200 milligram capsules or tablets. And so you might have to take 2 at a time, one in the morning, 2 at night, or 2 at a time, depending on your dose. But you don't have to take like 5 or 6. So as long as you buy one of these kind of higher dose range ones, it is feasible to take just a couple capsules twice a day, and you may find a benefit. And again, very high safety margin, because again, think about what I said, right? Just to know that I'm not trying to minimize this. When you go to the ER, I mean, we are pumping you full of NAC through a liquid IV straight into your veins at doses higher than what I just described. We know, we have decades of evidence of the safety margin. Okay. There is Cages. There's a major department store that starts with W who has 1,000 milligram NAC capsules. Yeah, no, there is. So again, I'm not promoting any particular place, but yeah, you could go on Walmart, Amazon. They have places where they have the 1,000 milligrams. So that is a very, in my opinion, and this I do recommend to my patients who have OCD and who have compulsive disorders pretty regularly, because again, risk benefit ratio. Are there risks? Yeah, there are risks. I mean, people get flushing sometimes, because we're using doses that are a little bit higher. than usual for like typical antioxidant purposes that people take as a multivitamin, right? So there could be some flushing, there could be some headaches, there could be some stomach upset, but mild and relatively tolerable for many patients. There could be some gassiness, that's another one. But then we stop it or lower the dose or try to give you less milligrams per dose increments, maybe spread them out, which can get a little annoying. But if for the sake of tolerability, we might have to do that. Chuckles, how's it going? Chuckles, thanks for joining. Chuckle says, what pharmacy med is similar to NAC? There's not a ton, honestly. So that's why I do find it, I put it kind of in its own unique category. And because it's low risk and it is relatively affordable, again, I use the term relative because I'm not going to take for granted hardworking Americans. Sometimes $15 may be the difference of putting some more food on the table versus trying something that's off-label, experimental, may or may not work. It's a tough decision, right? So we can't assume, oh, like it's just $15. Trust me, I have plenty of patients. It's paycheck to paycheck. So I want to be respectful and be like, yeah, it is a decision. That's why you don't hear me today going overboard. Oh, this is a cure-all. This is going to cure everything. Like you've heard some influencers and YouTubers out there. F them, man. That's irresponsible, right? I mean, it's just like we have to have balanced discussions. This is not going to work for everyone. Trust me. I've had plenty of my OCD patients who said, yeah, I might as well have been taking a Tic Tac, Dr. Kim. I didn't really feel much difference in my eyelash pulling, my hair pulling, my skin picking, my OCD. But you know what? I didn't have terrible side effects. We did it for a couple months. We gave it a shot. I have other patients who are very grateful. They're like, wow, you know what? I feel like it closed the gap between what my therapy was doing with therapy alone or what therapy and Prozac was doing, and it closed the gap and it provided further benefit. I'm glad we tried this, and it's a pretty low risk intervention. So the results are all over the map for what I've seen, even with my patients. But you know what? Low risk intervention, underutilized. I don't oversell it. I don't overpromise. I'm not pushing some specific brand. I don't own a line of NAC supplements. Take it, don't take it. I'm just saying I'm here to present you with flexible alternatives if it makes sense for you as an individual. I'm open minded. And if it's low risk and you're still suffering even with standard fare treatments, then why aren't we trying it? Right? I mean, let's give it a shot. Maybe these studies themselves are not perfect. They're not always going to be the most rigorous. But you know what? If it's keywords, low risk, what if you are one of those cohorts of people who benefited? Right? Let's give it a shot. So look, for the sake of time, we've been running for about an hour here. I'm running low on energy, so we're not going to cover valerian root, which is kind of a GABAergic medication. GABA itself, there's GABA. Ashwagandha is a adaptogen category med. It has some calming effects, maybe modulates cortisol even. So there's plenty of other things. And like I said, we could probably do a whole other episode with things that we didn't get around to today. But let's open it up for Q&A. Hopefully there was something there. I know some of these are household names. You probably heard of melatonin. You've probably heard of St. John's wort. Maybe you've heard of SAMe, but for some of you, maybe you've never heard of NAC. Maybe you've never heard of, curcumin, that interesting component in turmeric. Maybe you didn't know about hypericin is the actual active component of St. John's wort that needs to be there, right? So hopefully you found some pearl of wisdom or some takeaway to expand your knowledge base about complementary alternative meds or CAMs. And hopefully you could see that, I'm trying to present this in a fair and balanced way, that there's some evidence that's intriguing, very preliminary. Some of these I'm actually already recommending to some specific individuals, not everyone across the board, but I think in some cases of patients I'm treating, I do bring it up, when it makes sense to bring it up. So you could see, look, I'm very open-minded. I think that it helps some patients, it doesn't help others. So let's, in the last few minutes here, Q&A time, questions and answers. But also, I want to hear, what else have you heard of? Because I don't know ever. I told you from the beginning, I'm not an expert in cams. I just know what I know, and I'm willing to learn and do research. What other interesting cams options, naturalistic options have you taken yourself? Have you been hearing increased rumblings and noise about? I'd like to dive into. I mean, not even handy. I probably don't have an answer for a lot of those, but um, just what other ones have you heard of? I'd like to even just go do research on it. I like to open my mind, learn more. I'm always for learning. Okay, I'm stubborn on some things. I'm open minded on others. This is an area that I am open minded to. So, what other ones have you guys heard of? We'll open it up for a few minutes before we log off here. So, and again, for all of you who are regular listeners to the KGs and the D77s and the Chuckles, I appreciate you guys joining. For those of you who are new, because I still see several other people here, I appreciate you sticking it through. And if you have not subscribed, please please subscribe. But last call for questions. Any other cams or supplements or holistic options you have heard of, you've tried yourself, you want to know more about in a future episode? Probiotics. Yeah, there's definitely there's been research done about the gut mind connection, how they have looked into probiotics. I'd have to go dig some more, KG, to take a look at that. I'll see if I could dig up anything of substance. I mean, put it this way, KG. When there's a will, there's a way, right? It's gone even beyond probiotics. I know they've even looked at like fecal transplants and its effect on mood and anxiety. So, I mean, trust me, there is there is an obscure research study on anything you could imagine out there. So, and how do I know? Because at some point, I clearly, obviously, went on PubMed and I searched. I have no clue why on fecal transplants and antidepressant effects and anti-anxiety effects. So, yes, I know that there are studies out there on probiotics in depression. I'd have to take a look to see, are there any decent ones or good quality ones for us to talk about. But I can put that in my little to-do list that I keep growing here to look into that. Yeah, ashwagandha is a very interesting. I know that's a very popular one, ashwagandha. And again, ashwagandha is kind of still kind of a murky, but likely multi-modality, multi-mechanism type of CAMS D77. Yeah, I mean, some believe that there's enough evidence to say maybe it does promote GABA, GABA, to have some of that calming effect on a very mild level. Obviously, not something as potent to be abused like Xanax or Valium, etc. They believe that there is some serotonin mechanism for ashwagandha. They believe ashwagandha may actually reduce inflammation to some degree, may reduce cortisol or make you more resilient to chronically high cortisol levels. So, yeah, it seems to be multi-mechanism type of, CAMS basically. All right. Um, let's see, what other comments do we have coming in here? Got another comment from, let's see. Ray, what's up, Ray? Ray says, do you know about neurotropics and do they have any psychiatric benefits? Yeah, I mean, I know what you're talking about. I mean, there's like different brands out there. There's like Lion's Mane, there's all these different brands to like the Life Extension brand. There's, yeah, I mean, it really depends. Um, you know, so the word nootropic is very broad. So, it kind of depends on like what you're defining as a nootropic. So first, that's my first comment. It's how are you defining that, right? If you are just defining it grossly as something that addresses drowsiness and arousal and level of alertness or cognitive enhancing, technically speaking, you could literally categorize things like modafinil, um, and even like stimulants and Adderall as like nootropics. Okay, so like those would be prescription grade. So again, that's depending on how you define nootropics. So if you're just saying as a broad category, prescription variations of nootropics would be like modafinil, which is used as a wakefulness promoting agent for people who have narcolepsy or severe fatigue from sleep apnea. Stimulants, because of their cognitive enhancing um, benefits. And again, you've heard me, right? You've heard me talk about how I don't even know if ADHD is truly a valid paradigm. But regardless of whether you believe it's a valid paradigm or not, fact, what is fact is whether you do or don't have ADHD, stimulants will enhance your cognition. Now, there's arguments that, if you don't have ADHD, it might just be a marginal or modest improvement, and those who have ADHD may have greater gross raw improvement. Sure, I think that's feasible, but what's not disagreed upon for anyone who really gets it is like there is improvement across the boards, right? So that would be kind of a prescription grade prototypical like nootropic. Weirdly enough, we call them stimulants, but that's a cognitive enhancer, right? And it's almost diagnosis agnostic, right? Except for those who get such bad anxiety that the anxiety then overrides the cognitive benefits, right? But minus someone who's in that category, yeah, I mean, they enhance cognition, right? So, uh, technically speaking, like those are technically nootropics, right? Um, so then if you go into the realm of like non-prescription grade, yeah, then it gets super broad as well. So I guess it kind of depends on how you're defining nootropic. Technically speaking, right? Like ashwagandha is considered a nootropic, right? Various forms of mushroom strains are considered nootropic. So technically speaking, to broadly answer your question, like yes, because all of those theoretically have some benefits for psychiatric conditions. So if you had a specific subtype of nootropics that you're curious about, let me know, and then I could get a little more specific with my answer, or at least specific in a future episode. So I know that was kind of vague, but it's just that term itself is thrown around rather broadly. That it depends how you're defining nootropic. So let me know if you're thinking about a specific chemical holistic intervention, um but they generally like categorize nootropics into, right, like they're smart drugs divided into dietary supplements, synthetic compounds, prescription drugs. So tell me if you're thinking about some specific subtype, and then I can get back to you maybe in a future episode about that. Okay, last call for questions. Still see some of you are here. Last minute ones before we wrap up for tonight. If there are no further questions, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for bearing with me as I took a day off on Saturday, but we'll continue this Tuesdays and Saturdays, 10:30 Central, 11:30 Eastern, unless I have to take another mental health day. So, hope you guys, KG, hope you go take that melatonin. Hope the paella is less depressing with the saffron. So again, your zingers are second to none. So I appreciate you, KG. And Ray, get back to me. Let me know if there's a specific nootropic category that you wanted me to comment on. Besides fecal transplants, I'll look into some probiotic stuff to see if I could find anything in the future. Maybe for another follow-up episode 2 about complementary meds. But I appreciate you guys. You guys have a good night. Take it easy. Get some rest, you insomniacs. And I will look forward to the next episode. And please subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Have a good night, everybody. Take it easy. Be healthy. Be well. Hope you don't bill us for Saturday. I won't bill you for Saturday. I wish. Have a good one, Chuckles. Have a good night, everybody.